Okay, let's see what the news has in store for us this week. So, the top UK alternative media stories for the past 7 days. Top of the heap, UK government faces renewed scrutiny over press freedom. Independent outlets continue to highlight the UK's declining press freedom environment, citing restrictive libel laws, increased hostility towards dissent, and the shrinking space for oppositional journalism. This follows long-running concerns that the UK is now one of the worst countries in Western Europe for overall press freedom. Well, we know about the DSMA. We know that the DSMA restrict what our journalists are able to print and to tell us citizens, because if it doesn't fit with the official government narrative of what they would like us to know, then they aren't allowed to print it. And if they do try and print, then they are curtailed by the DSMA. If you haven't seen the DSMA video, do give it a watch. It was very interesting and just confirmed for me what I'd kind of known for a long time when it came to mainstream media. I haven't, as I've not been here for 3 weeks, looking at the news, deliberately not looking at the news, I haven't really seen very much, but it doesn't surprise me that the UK's declining press freedoms are a concern. I'm not sure who they're a concern for. It doesn't really say. Copilot doesn't give us any kind of indication. I'm presuming that, as I've asked Copilot to look at the independent media, that it's possibly independent media sources that are concerned about press freedom. But we do know this. We already know this of the UK. Like I say, check out the DSMA video that I put up on YouTube on the Research Hub. It's an interesting one. Alternative media pushback on BBC narrative about guerrilla news sites. The Guardian reported claim that alternative outlets are waging a guerrilla war on the BBC resurfaced in independent commentary this week. Independent journalists argue the BBC's framing reflects establishment discomfort with rising distrust in mainstream media and the growth of alternative platforms. Well, I would go so far as to say that the BBC is dead. I don't think that when it comes to news, the general populace really believe what the BBC have to say anymore. From what I've heard and read, the declining licensing fees has become an issue. The people of this country have decided that they really don't want to pay for crap that they're not interested in. And the BBC really doesn't spout anything but crap, really. So that doesn't surprise me either. Critical re-examination of UK's foreign policy narratives. Independent sources revisited the UK's historic media alignment with government positions on Iraq, Libya, and Syria. These outlets argue that mainstream coverage understands civilian casualties and overstated humanitarian motives. So they understated, civilian casualties and overstated humanitarian motives, an issue they say remains relevant as new Middle East tensions unfold. So our historic media alignment with government positions on Iraq, Libya, and Syria. Well, I can tell you that alternative media do not follow what I would class as UK's historic media alignment with the government's position. And our move away from mainstream media, I think generally the population do not believe in mainstream media anymore. And therefore, the government are finding it very difficult to have the narrative they would prefer come across to the general citizens of this country, because we are very adept at looking at alternative sources. And the alternative sources we know that we can trust, rather than mainstream, which we know that we can't. So the government are not getting their narrative over. And when it comes to places like Iraq, Libya, and Syria, I'm not really sure what our historic alignment is when it comes to the narrative on those. In my understanding, the war in Iraq was a complete debacle and which should never have happened. Libya, again, the same. Syria, our involvement in Syria, really bad. And what's happened in Syria, to have the leader of Al Qaeda actually running the country, and then to have him welcomed, the leader of a terrorist organization, welcomed to our country by our Prime Minister and also by our King, doesn't really bode well. Spotlight on the erosion of public trust in mainstream news. Alternative outlets highlighted new data showing that half of surveyed respondents consume mainstream media less than once per week. Well, I can tell you I consume mainstream media not at all, not a jot, and haven't done for about 20 odd years. Pointing to a long-term collapse in trust, independent journalists frame this as evidence that audiences are actively seeking non-corporate perspectives. Exactly what I said on the last point 3. We don't buy the rhetoric anymore. We don't buy the claptrap that they expect us to just consume. We don't buy it anymore. We're not stupid. And I think we are sick of being basically treated like we're stupid by our mainstream media. We just don't buy it. So that doesn't surprise me either. Growing interest in independent news ecosystems. Oh, it's all about the news, isn't it? Several alternative media guides and directories gained traction this week, reflecting increased public appetite for non-mainstream reporting. Lists of top UK independent outlets, ranging from investigative platforms to commentary-driven sites, circulated widely as readers look for broader viewpoints. And that's it from Copilot. He says what it means for you about independent UK media this week being focused. So it's all about the media. It's all about the mainstream. It's all about people not believing the slop that they're fed anymore and looking in alternative places for different viewpoints. Power to the people. Power to the people, mate. As far as I'm concerned, that's great. So that was Copilot. We'll now ask Claude the same thing. We'll see if Claude comes up with the same kind of stories. So here is a roundup of the top UK news stories from the past 7 days from Claude. And Claude puts what I would have expected Copilot to put first: the Iran war, Hormuz Strait and UK coalition diplomacy. UK Foreign Secretary Yvette Cooper chaired a virtual meeting of foreign ministers from 40 countries to discuss options to reopen the Strait of Hormuz, a vital shipping lane choked off amid the US-Israel war on Iran. Cooper accused Iran of blockading the waterway to hold the global economy hostage. The Bank of England has held its interest rate at 3.75%, but warned of a shock to the economy from the war that will push up inflation. Global oil prices briefly exceeded $100 a barrel. Well, This is the kind of slop that we're being fed on the mainstream media. I don't agree with Yvette Cooper at all. Not a jot. I agree that the Strait of Hormuz is a vital shipping lane, and it has been choked off by the US-Israeli war. It wasn't choked off before they struck Iran. Everything was moving through the strait with no problems before they struck Iran. And Iran closed the strait because of the war and said that any country that wished to pass through the strait were free to do so and are still free to do so, providing they are not supporting the US and Israel in any way, shape, or form. And the way Iran has kind of framed it is that, as far as they're concerned, the US and Israel are run by genocidal maniacs who take great delight in protecting paedophilic people. And until the US has left the Middle East completely, and until the countries that are in the Middle East no longer house any US bases, then the strait is free to open. So when Yvette Cooper says that Iran is holding the global economy hostage, that's a load of claptrap. Iran isn't holding the global economy hostage at all. Iran has stated very, very clearly that anybody is free to pass through the Strait of Hormuz as long as they're not supporting the US and Israel. So that's untrue. The Bank of England, shock to the economy. Well, they would love it to be a shock to the economy because then they've got excuses to lock us down and keep us in. Or you can't afford to drive. You're going to have to drive really slowly so you preserve petrol. You won't be able to travel. So it will be another excuse. Mark my words, it will be another excuse. Okay, point 2. RAF Lakenheath protest and arrests. 7 activists were arrested near RAF Lakenheath, protesting the alleged use of the US airbase as a departure point for American aircraft involved in the Iran conflict. Grassroots protesters shut down operations at the Suffolk base on the morning of the 7th of April. So for us, that was yesterday. We're doing this live on a Wednesday. If you're watching on YouTube, you will be seeing it Sunday. So this would be Tuesday that the protesters shut down operations, and rightly so. Rightly so, because we know it has been exposed that although the UK have said that they're not involved in the conflict, although the UK has said that it's got nothing to do with us, and no, we're not going to allow the US to utilize our bases. We have been letting them use our bases, and they have blatantly been basically putting bombs onto their aircraft in open view. And those bombs are going to bomb Iran. So, rightly so, protests. The arrests, not very happy about that. However, the activists are on the right side of history, as far as I'm concerned, in my opinion. Number 3, welfare reform and disability cuts. Hundreds of thousands of sick or disabled people are being offered voluntary help towards employment as part of a government welfare reform package that came into force on the 6th of April, expected to save around £1 billion for taxpayers. Critics from independent outlets like The Canary have framed this as an attack on the most vulnerable. Now, I haven't heard anything about this in alternative media, but I have tried to keep off of alternative media during the spring equinox. So it may well have been flagged up quite a bit and I've just missed it. It's the hundreds of thousands of sick or disabled people are being offered voluntary help towards employment. I would argue that if they're particularly sick or disabled and are receiving benefits because of that possibly they're not actually able enough for employment. But we'll see. We'll see what moves forward with that. Point 4, the Wireless Festival has been cancelled. Kanye West banned. This year's Wireless Festival was cancelled after the government blocked Kanye West from entering the UK, citing that his presence would not be conducive to public good, following a backlash over his anti-Semitic remarks and his celebration of Nazism. Festival organisers confirmed ticket holders would be refunded. I had heard about Kanye West being blocked from coming to the UK. And again, the anti-Semitism has been banned. The word anti-Semitism has been bandied about. From what I understand, Kanye West is against Zionism. However, our government would like to conflate the two. Anti-Semitism is the attack and basically saying nasty things about Jewish people, whereas I would say Kanye West is an anti-Zionist. So yet again, our government have conflated the two. I would have to look more deeply into it. He may well be an anti-Semite. I'm not sure. But I was sure we had freedom of speech in this country. Evidently not. Point 5. Kent meningitis B outbreak continues. A meningitis B outbreak that began in mid-March in Canterbury, believed to have started at a nightclub, has reached 21 linked cases as of the 31st of March. The vaccination scheme has since been expanded. Health officials say it is still too early to say whether the outbreak has peaked. I'm not a great proponent of vaccination. I don't agree with vaccination. And the fact that our government want to roll out a vaccination scheme for it concerns me greatly. I will look into that a little bit further because that may well become a mandatory thing, and that would make me very uncomfortable. So I will look into that from a health and wellbeing point of view. I think it's very important that we expand upon that a little bit. So I will do some research. I'll do a bit of a deep dive and I'll bring you the results if I feel that it could be something that would be rolled out regardless of what we want. Point 6, record April heat. Isn't it amazing? From January, where it was raining constantly and we were flooding, now we have record April heat. The UK experienced one of its warmest starts to April on record, with temperatures hitting 26.5 degrees in the southwest London, hotter than Ibiza, Rome and Marrakesh. Well, it just means that we're going to probably have just a normal summer. I don't think we'll have exceedingly hot temperatures during the summer. If we've started a reasonably warm April, but it says on record, and then it makes you ask the question, when did the record start and what was it doing in April before the record started? If you remember, I took a look at the global warming charts and actually looked right back in history rather than from when they started recording them. Not everything is as it seems when it comes to our weather. Point 7, Home Affairs Committee warns on extremism. The Home Affairs Committee warned that a failure to move beyond a counter-terror mindset has left the country ill-prepared to deal with new forms of extremism, saying the prevent referral mechanism is unprepared for the reality of modern radicalisation. That comes from UK Parliament. They're probably looking at the fact that we as citizens take no notice of the mainstream anymore as modern radicalism. Like we're all radicals. We're all moving away from their slop. We're not interested in what they have to say anymore. We've all become radicals. I don't care what the Home Affairs Committee have to say. I don't think it's extremist to not agree with our government. Point 8. Labour political turmoil. A leaflet emerged featuring ex-Tory councillors claiming to be endorsed by Jeremy Corbyn, adding to internal Labour tensions. Byline Times reported on the resignation of a key Starmer strategist, republishing earlier investigations into how Labour's direction risks ceding ground to the far right. Well, I haven't seen anything about that either, but then that wouldn't be a surprise. A councillor claiming to be endorsed by Jeremy Corbyn, ex-Tory councillor. Well, I mean, I actually quite like Jeremy Corbyn. I think he's got quite a lot of wherewithal, and I feel we were duped out of having him as our Prime Minister by our current Prime Minister and Morgan McSweeney as well, and Mr. Mandelson, who decided that he didn't like Mr. Corbyn and got him out of the Labour Party. So, yeah, but, you know, my thoughts on politics, it doesn't matter who's actually in power, if power is the right word to use. They're all controlled. They're all controlled by the global cabal. So it doesn't really matter who Jeremy Corbyn has endorsed or not. It's just an excuse for them to tweet and get angry. So that's it from Claude. So different to Copilot. Now we'll ask Grok. Okay, we actually have the US-Iran ceasefire as point 1 on Grok, and the UK involvement. A 2-week US-Iran ceasefire was announced, with Keir Starmer travelling to Saudi Arabia and the Gulf to support it and push for reopening the Strait of Hormuz, critical for oil and gas flows. Starmer stated there's a lot of work to do to make it permanent and stabilise UK prices. I have seen quite a bit today, just today and yesterday, about this US-Iran ceasefire. The US decided that they were going to really, well, I would say kind of shout at Iran about what their capabilities were and how they were going to force them into doing certain things. And Iran really just kind of laughed in their faces and said, look, if you want a ceasefire, these are our terms. And they laid out 10 terms. And as far as I'm aware, the US has capitulated and said, oh, okay, then. Okay. But if you ask the US, they've won. Like according to them, Iran pleaded for a ceasefire. I don't think that's true. But I don't think anything that's coming out of the US is true at the moment. I think it's all just propaganda and slop. We seem to have a lot of slop. The fact that Keir Starmer's decided to travel to Saudi Arabia, whatever for. Whatever for. I mean, it's, yeah. Oh, possibly to be laughed at, maybe. I don't know. Okay, related angles to this. The UK naval issues. The Royal Navy's HMS Dragon, sent to protect the bases, returned to port due to technical problems, faulty water systems. Why does that not surprise me? Okay, domestic political friction. Starmer faced criticism from figures like Nigel Farage and Kemi Badenoch over the UK stance, with accusations of reluctance to escalate. Trump reportedly mocked the UK Starmer and questioned NATO's effectiveness. Paper Tiger. Well, the mocking of UK Starmer is not a surprise. Economic fallout, oil price spikes, builder cost inflation hitting records. Failing house prices and warnings of higher UK inflation, mortgage costs tied to the conflict. Protests in London, including crowds chanting Allah Akbar outside Downing Street, opposed Trump and the strikes. The economic fallout side of things, just like when the Ukrainian war started, it was the excuse for everything that was going wrong in the UK. They used the Ukrainian war. That was just after COVID. So we had the COVID debacle, the pandemic, and then we were thrown straight into, all right, okay, we've got them on the back foot over COVID. Now we're going to throw a war at them in Ukraine. And it was the excuse for everything that was wrong in our country. And now they're using the Iran conflict as an excuse for everything that's wrong in our country. I would hazard a guess that our politicians are what's wrong with our country. Point two, Kanye West banned from the UK. So we've had this wireless festival cancelled. The Home Office blocked Kanye West, Ye is his name now, from entering the UK due to his history of anti-Semitic remarks and controversies. This led to the cancellation of Wireless Festival, where he was the headliner, with reports of potential £30 million losses. Public reactions were mixed, with some calling it good riddance and others debating free speech cancel culture, much like I did. I really thought we had free speech in this country. I remember when JD Vance stood and said, oh, you don't have free speech in the UK. And Starmer assured him that we do. No, we don't. No, we don't. JD Vance was right for once. Point three, retail crime out of control. Marks and Spencer's warning. Marks and Spencer's warned that shoplifting and violence against staff has become out of control, with employees fearing going to work. Incidents including ammonia attacks causing hospital visits. This highlighted broader debates on policing, retail theft, and two-tier responses to crime. Well, I have always looked at Marks and Spencer's as one of the kind of higher end. It's up there with like Waitrose, really. So I've just got this image of like a 55-year-old grandma going into Marks and Spencer's and stealing, shoplifting and throwing things at staff. I haven't heard anything about it in alternative media. And I know that I'm laughing at something that's possibly not very great. The fact that somebody was hospitalized from an ammonia attack is not good. But ammonia, that could just be urine. You know what media is like. Like somebody could have just thrown some urine at them and that would be an ammonia attack. So without having a bit more context, it's difficult. It's difficult for me to take it seriously anyway, but it is a bit difficult for me to take it seriously. Point four, ongoing small boat migrant crossings and asylum issues. No shit. Reports of continued channel crossings, hundreds in short periods during good weather, with criticism of Labour's policies. A judge blocked the removal of an Eritrean small boat migrant to France over mental health concerns. Former border force officials highlighted perceived weaknesses in enforcement. Again, you know my views when it comes to asylum seekers and migrant crossings. Why would these people be choosing to leave their countries? Why would they be choosing to leave their countries? The place where they were born, the place where their home is. Could it be that they're riddled with war and that we had some form of a hand in that? Possibly, maybe. Point five, knife crime and government responses. Plans for mapping technology and targeted funding, £26 million to tackle knife crime hotspots, including parent classes in affected areas. This came amid separate stabbing incidents reported in London and elsewhere. Broader discussions linked it to youth violence, grooming gangs, and policing priorities. yeah, when it comes to the level of crime, knife crime has increased. And I mean, they're talking about London there, but I think from what I can tell, knife crime has increased actually across the board. It's not just in London. Um, thank goodness we don't have gun control and we don't allow guns in this country. Obviously, if you want to have a gun and you want to do something awful with it, then you will. If where there's a means, there's a way. So yeah, it's not surprising that knife crime has increased, really. When you think about the frustrations that people are facing, when you think about the general depravity of lots of different areas, especially in London, it isn't really hugely surprising that there's an increase. People are suffering, and people are suffering economically. They're suffering generally, and this is the fallout from it, unfortunately. Okay, other notable mentions from Grok. Economic, political, Bank of England holding rates amid global uncertainty, accusations against Rachel Reeves over blocking North Sea investment, business confidence lows. Not surprising. And miscellaneous, a cannabis farm found in a historic stately home, debates over National Health Service strikes, doctor pay, and the jury trial reductions, Reform UK receiving high-profile donations, billionaire expats returning to support the party. Okay. Well, from the miscellaneous point of view, I love the fact that somebody has a cannabis farm in their stately home. I think that's brilliant. I think that's really funny. National Health Service strikes. When we were all standing outside banging pots for the National Health Service, that wasn't ever going to be enough to keep them happy. That we have underfunded the National Health Service and our doctors for so long. And even regardless of what you think about COVID, regardless of what you think about the pandemic, we do not value our National Health Service staff enough in any way, shape, or form. We should value them much more highly than we do. Jury trial reductions, there is just a massive ongoing debate over reducing our jury trials. I've brought that to you on the Research Hub if you want to go and check that out. It's now the mantle's been taken up by barristers and legal professionals across the justice system, and rightly so. And they're standing up and they're saying this is not acceptable. So there's a couple of bits that I will be looking at from a health and wellbeing point of view. I will definitely be looking at the vaccine problems, and I think it was the meningitis outbreak. I'll do a dive into that and see if there's something that I can bring to you on that, if it's something that really we should be paying attention to. But apart from that, it's all about the mainstream media being crap. And it's all about the war and the effects of the war. So that was the news for this week.